A trade war, labor battles, and Supreme Court decisions. Those are just a few of the topics we've been talking about on the 306 this week. The province announced its response yesterday to the U.S. tariffs. David talked a bit about it in the news. The opposition says it was a day late and $1 short. An arbitration board ruled class complexity will be part of a new contract for teachers. And Metis Nation, Saskatchewan are claiming a victory over the province with a Supreme Court decision in their fight for consultation. Our public affairs panel is here to share thoughts on it all. Dale Richardson is principal at Earnscliffe Strategies. He's here in Regina. And Jack Saddleback is a professional speaker in Saskatoon. Good afternoon, Dale.
Hello.
And hello, Jack.
Hey, Dante.
So let's get into the substance of Premier Moe's response to U.S. tariffs. They include the American booze, of course, and efforts to minimize U.S. materials and infrastructure projects. Jack, what's your reaction to the measures?
Well, when it comes to the booze talk, I'm going to say it's about damn time. It's a big market here in our province, and being able to do a little bit of prowess by pulling it off of the shelves is a move that should have been on the forefront when we start having these discussions. When it comes to Moe, I will have to agree with the opposition that he took a little bit too much time to actually talk about what was going to happen, give us a little bit of indication as the public where they were standing with these tariffs. But at the same time, I will applaud that he took some considerations. I have some hesitations on why he took such a long time to take those considerations and bring them to the public. I do also want to state that when it comes to Beck and the push and pressure to have the inclusion of the opposition, we are in a time that is like no other that we've had in our province before. And I think it's important that we actually do have the opposition at the table, whether or not the Legislative Assembly is sitting, that they have some say in where this province should be going regarding these tariffs. And, it's unfortunate that we have to wait this long, be the last province to have a premier step up. That's a little bit too late.
Dale, I do want to come back to that, to what the opposition's been calling for weeks now. But just in general, what are your thoughts on the actions the government has taken?
Yeah, I think it's good. People are mad. I'm pretty pissed off about things. I mean, Mr. Trump, he keeps doing what he's been doing since he's been in office. And I think we need to realize at a certain point here, Peter, that he's punking us. He's messing with us. He's going to keep doing this every month. He's going to say that there's going to be tariffs, and then guess what? There's not, or it's going to be partial tariffs. So I think it's great that the premier and his government that they responded in the way that they did. I really like today, even after the news that the tariffs are scaled back or partially going to be put in place. I like that the government is still keeping our measures in place in response, because this is going to keep going. Mr. Trump, he sees this as a virtue for himself, keeping his opponents. And again, it's crazy that Canada is seen that way to him, but he sees it as a strength to keep people on their toes, and then he changes things up, and that's a strength for him. But no, I think that these measures that our province put in place, it's a good start.
What do you think the approach will be, again, considering this might go back and forth? You said this game that President Trump's playing. How do you think the province navigates that, whether to keep these restrictions in on U.S. booze, for example, long term, or if they say, okay, we've had a pause, now let's also pause?
I think they need to do it very carefully because, I think that there have been calls the last couple of days to do more, or some people were saying that the premier's response yesterday was weak in terms of the measures. I haven't seen anybody put forward, additional measures in terms of what that might look like. No, the government needs to be careful and thoughtful because at a certain point, depending on what the measures are, the penalties from our side, they might impact Saskatchewan jobs here because of the integration between our two economies and our two countries. Right? Premier talked a couple of weeks ago about steel products that are made at Evraz, just north of the city here. those products can cross the border between the U.S. and Canada many, many, many times. So that could hurt jobs here at home as well as, potentially, jobs in the U.S. So the government needs to be very thoughtful about it. I know that they are, and that's the right move to be taking.
Jack, I don't want to ignore you, and I'm sorry for asking Dale 3 straight questions, but Jack did bring it up about bringing the ledge back. We've talked about this multiple times.
Yeah.
Have you thought any differently about this, Dale?
No.
Yeah, tell me why not.
So my position, it remains the same. And my position, it's the same federally as well. The federal Conservatives, they have been calling on the Trudeau Liberal government to recall the House of Commons for the same reason, essentially. And I think it's a mistake. It doesn't take into account the reality that governments, because of the levers and the powers that they have, they can do more. They can put more time and effort into doing what they need to do to respond to this crisis that our country is in. And as I said last time I was here, in the Legislative Assembly here or in the House of Commons or any other province, it's all politics. And at this time, despite I know that the NDP, they want to do what's politically advantageous for them. It makes sense. I totally understand that. But it's all politics. And again, this is not a time for politics.
Jack, do you want to expand further on that? Is it even worth it just to bring it back from a perception of unity and working together?
Well, I would like to stand on the guys that we can have a unified legislative assembly. Hopefully. And I think one of the interesting things about politics is there's such a dichotomy that happens, and Dale certainly has alluded to it, that when people are sitting in the Legislative Assembly, and those are the things that we see televised, those quite often, that's the theatrics that play out. That's the yelling, that's the name calling, that's the elbow gate that happened how many years ago. That's where theatrics play out. The real politics and decision making comes in play around committees, comes in play around these discussions that we as the public aren't necessarily privy to at times, because there are such detailed and nuanced conversations that do take a lot of time and consideration. This is where I think our province would be able to, as a smaller province that has a smaller number of people that are representing us as citizens, we have the power to be able to sit down and actually have constructive conversations, because we don't have that many cooks in the kitchen, as you may say. And with these challenging and chaotic and unpredictable situations that are coming up from the states, there is some power in us coming together as a province, as political bodies, and as citizens to be able to discuss what are the proper or positive pathways forward. And I do hope that our Saskatchewan government is able to put good faith of that inclusion even to the opposition party. Because right now there's a little bit too much concentrated power and these decisions, and I get that we want to be able to navigate this in a nice, cohesive way, but when we have too much power sitting in one space, that makes me uneasy.
Peter, when the ledge comes back on March 19th, I look forward to the NDP standing shoulder to shoulder in full support with the Sask Party government on everything that they do.
I didn't necessarily say full support.
I look forward
there has to
it.
be discussions.
It'll be such a nice moment of harmony and unity. It's going to be great.
Let's move on to another topic that was one of the topics that created this panel with you guys. The arbitration board's ruling that says class complexity will be part of a new contract for teachers. This was a main stumbling block on negotiations. Jack, what's your reaction to this ruling?
I think it's an awesome ruling. To be quite honest, the inclusion of class complexity has been long and hard fight for STF to be able to put that on the table. Quite often, the government was coming back saying yes, but no around classroom complexity, and with the arbitration putting it forward that it must be included, and now it's up to STF and the government to simply decide on the language of what class complexity means, is a big win for STF in this decade-long-ish battle to be able to get proper funding for classroom complexity. And as we look at this next school year with that inclusion, it's a big win for the youth that are coming through these educational institutions.
Dale, any thoughts on the ruling or just how the government approached this?
Just out of full transparency, the STF, they're a past client of mine, which might surprise some people on listening to this. But no, I think both sides, the government and the STF, I think they're probably happy to be moving past this finally. Yeah, I mean, the last couple of years with job action, the billboard campaign that the government ran, related to this, it was pretty nasty for a while there. So, I think probably from both sides, maybe more so from the government side of things. I think some lessons will be learned in terms of tactics for the next round of bargaining, which will start pretty quickly, actually, because I think that this agreement runs out in 2026. So they'll be back at the bargaining table pretty quick. But I think both sides are happy to be moving on from this.
Well, let's go to another ruling. This one is from the Supreme Court. It ruled the province can't use ongoing court cases as a reason to not consult the Métis Nation before development proceeds. Now, Jean Taillé is an Indigenous rights litigator and the great-grandniece of Louis Riel, and here's what she had to say on the 306 this week.
It's disappointing to everyone that the government of Saskatchewan continues on a path of denying Métis rights, denying that they have any consultation duties to the Métis. It's like they drew a line in the sand, and they're doing everything they can by putting up these roadblocks and fighting the Métis Nation all the way down the line. And I think it's really upsetting, it's disturbing, and it is, I think, quite frankly, against the settled law of Canada. And the government of Saskatchewan just continues to barge its way along in this path of denial, delay, all of that kind of mess that's going on in your province.
That's Indigenous rights litigator Jean Taillé, and the decision came down around the same time that Premier Moe said, quote, all pipeline permits going east, west, or south received in Saskatchewan will be considered pre-approved. But we know the process doesn't really work that way. Federal regulators have to consider environmental and social impact. Now we obviously need to be talking about consultation as well. Jack, just what's your reaction to this case?
Well, I do want to touch on Mo's comment there and say he really put his foot in his mouth with that comment. The Environmental Assessment Act, which was installed in 2019, I believe, so it's a federally regulated act that has any sort of resource development that is proposed, any new resource development that's proposed has to go through certain checks and balances and consultations with the relevant stakeholders, and that includes Indigenous peoples that the resource would be developing on. So this particular Supreme Court case, I think, is phenomenal in being able to lay some groundwork for Métis rights here in our province. Our province, unfortunately, does not have the best track record when it comes to discussions with Indigenous groups. It has gotten better, but it certainly is not necessarily the star player in all of these relationships that happen. But I am hopeful that over these past few years, we have learned a lot, specifically Scott Moe, with his own understanding about reconciliation and what that means from a governmental side of things in relation with Indigenous peoples of Saskatchewan. So it's a big win for Métis folks.
Dale?
Do we have a lot of time left? Because I could talk about this for quite a long time.
I could give you 3 minutes.
It's okay, Peter. I'm just being funny. Listen, the federal law that Jack referenced, it's I think Bill C-69 or C-59 maybe. It's also called the No More Pipelines Act because that's what has resulted from that law. There have been no pipelines built in this country because of that. And guess what? With the tariff and the trade war going on with the U.S., we need to build pipelines in this country. We need to build everything. We need to move the things, and I've talked about this before, we need to move the things that we grow and take out of the ground. We need to move it to Tidewater to sell to Southeast Asia because we're not going to sell it to the Americans, apparently. So, you know, I honestly think I'm not going to speak to the ruling so much as, because I'm not a legal scholar, but people in this country and in this province in particular, we want pipelines. I would submit actually that Premier Mo's comments were likely very popular in this province.
Right, but there is still a duty to consult.
Sure, and that's an important process. The problem, not specific to this case with the Métis Nation, but just in general,
right,
is when something like a pipeline is seen as critical to the success, to the economic success of this province and this country, and there are certain people, small groups maybe, that are seen to be blocking it out of their own personal interests, where as a whole, it is seen as a benefit to the country. And that's when I think people like Premier Mo and others, and I would include myself, that's when it gets frustrating for people, because we want things to happen. We want people to be working. We want our governments to have revenues that can pay for healthcare, education, social services, all types of government services, and that's how that happens. And for those things to be blocked, it's hard to see past.
Jack Dale didn't use his full time, so you got a minute if you want to respond.
Perfect.
I thought I was running out the clock there.
As I certainly do hear the discussions that Dale is bringing up. And what I will also say is that the benefit of now it being 2025 is that we do have First Nations, Métis, and Inuit professionals who do work in resource development, who do understand the world of duty to consult, who do understand this Environmental Assessment Act and how it impacts both positive and negative Indigenous groups and lands. Now, when it comes to this specific Supreme Court case, I will state that the reason why it came up was because the Saskatchewan government did not do its duty to consult. So that's a big red flag right there. However, with saying so, like I said, I'm an optimist. Go ahead and beat me down if you want to, but I will be a perpetual optimist that this quote-unquote failure that happened is actually a learning lesson for our province to recognize that duty to consult should be there at the forefront. Before anything needs to take place, there has to be a sit-down and a culturally relevant discussion with individuals, and as well step into the new age of resource development. We can do things in a good way that are environmentally sound and are socially and economically sound for the province and Indigenous folks that this affects.
I love ending it with some optimism. Dale, I got to go, Dale.
By the way, for the people listening and watching, Peter has a great shirt on. It's a Kansas Jayhawks 2008 championship shirt, Rock Chalk Jayhawk.
Best ending yet. Thanks, Jack. Thanks, Dale.
Thank you.